The 1970s weren't just a decade of basketball. They were a decade of balance and transformation. This was the only era where no single dynasty ruled. 8 different franchises won championships in 10 years, a level of parity the league has never seen before or since. It was the decade where legends cemented their names. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar dominated with the unstoppable skyhook. Bill Walton brought a new kind of big man brilliance. The Knicks won with teamwork and toughness at Madison Square Garden. And Julius Erving was soaring in the ABA, turning dunks into art and challenging the NBA's monopoly on talent. The moments, they became history. Willis Reed limping out of the tunnel in 1970. The Knicks' 2 titles built on unselfish play. Kareem winning his first championship in Milwaukee. Portland's shocking rise in '77. And of course, the ABA-NBA merger in 1976. A move that brought stars like Dr. J and George Gervin into the NBA, expanded the league to new cities, and set the stage for the modern game. Each season gave us something unforgettable, something historic, something that pushed basketball forward. The 70s weren't just about basketball. They were about change, expansion, innovation, and the foundation for everything that came next. This is every NBA season of the 1970s explained. If you were watching the NBA in 1970, you remember a league at a crossroads. The 1960s Celtics dynasty was finally over. Wilt Chamberlain was still dominating, and a new generation of stars was starting to take the spotlight. The regular season belonged to the New York Knicks. This wasn't a one-man show. It was a basketball symphony. Walt Clyde Frazier, Willis Reed, Bill Bradley, and Dave DeBusschere led a team that played unselfish, disciplined, beautiful basketball. They finished with 60 wins, the best in the league, and Madison Square Garden became the epicenter of the NBA. The Knicks weren't just winning. They were winning the right way. Out west, the Los Angeles Lakers were still the Lakers. Jerry West was still Mr. Clutch. Elgin Baylor was still filling up the stat sheet. And Wilt Chamberlain was still bigger and stronger than everybody else. Even as age started creeping in, LA finished with 46 wins and made it clear they were still chasing a title. But the biggest story wasn't just the Knicks' rise or the Lakers' star power. It was how the decade itself was about to change. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, then Lou Alcindor, entered the league this season, instantly becoming one of the best players in basketball as a rookie with the Milwaukee Bucks. He averaged nearly 29 points and 14 rebounds per game, won Rookie of the Year, and made it obvious that the league's future belonged to him. The playoffs gave us drama. In the East, the Knicks powered past Baltimore and Milwaukee to reach the finals, their unselfish style holding up under pressure. In the West, the Lakers battled through Atlanta before surviving against Milwaukee in a grueling 7-game series, setting up a dream matchup, Knicks versus Lakers. And the finals? They gave us one of the most iconic moments in NBA history. The series was a war, going all the way to Game 7 at Madison Square Garden. Before tip-off, the Knicks leader Willis Reed was doubtful with a torn muscle in his thigh. But in the tunnel, the Garden crowd erupted as Reed limped onto the court. He could barely move, but he hit the first 2 jumpers of the game, giving his team the emotional jolt they needed. From there, Walt Frazier took over, dropping 36 points and 19 assists in one of the greatest finals performances ever. The Knicks crushed the Lakers 113-99, and New York captured its first championship. When the buzzer sounded, it wasn't just a Knicks victory. It was a passing of the torch. The Celtics' reign was over. A new decade had begun. And with stars like Frazier, West, Reed, and a young Kareem, the NBA was entering a golden age of parity and unforgettable moments. 1970 wasn't just another season. It was the year the Knicks put New York on the basketball map. The year Kareem arrived. The year Willis Reed inspired the entire sport by simply walking on the floor. If you were watching the NBA in 1971, you remember a league being introduced to its new king. The Boston Celtics were no longer in control. The Knicks had just won their first championship. And now, a young superstar was about to take the league by storm. That superstar? Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. then still known as Lou Alcindor. In just his second season with the Milwaukee Bucks, Kareem didn't just dominate, he annihilated. He averaged 31 points and 16 rebounds, won his first MVP award at just 23 years old, and made it clear that the NBA's future ran through him. But Kareem wasn't alone. In the offseason, Milwaukee pulled off one of the biggest steals in NBA history, trading for Oscar Robertson. The Big O, even in his early 30s, still had plenty left in the tank. Paired with Kareem, he gave the Bucks the exact mix of leadership and playmaking they needed. The regular season was pure domination. The Bucks finished with 66 wins, the second highest total in NBA history at the time, and looked nearly unstoppable. Kareem's skyhook was automatic. Oscar controlled the floor, and role players like Bob Dandridge fit perfectly into the system. Over in the East, the Knicks were still contenders, and the Baltimore Bullets made a strong push behind Wes Unseld and Earl Monroe. In the West, the Lakers were aging but still dangerous, while the Hawks and Bulls were scrapping to make noise. But really, 1971 felt inevitable from the start. Milwaukee looked different, like a team years ahead of the league. The playoffs proved it. The Bucks stormed through the Western Conference, first beating the Warriors in 5 and then handling the Lakers in 5. Out East, the Bullets shocked everyone, upsetting both the Sixers and the defending champion Knicks to reach the finals. But once they got there, they were overwhelmed. The Bucks destroyed the Bullets in a 4-game sweep, winning by an average margin of 12 points per game. Kareem was untouchable. Oscar was brilliant, and Milwaukee celebrated its first championship in just its 3rd year of existence as a franchise. When the buzzer sounded, the message was clear. The torch had officially been passed. Willis Reed's heroics in 1970 were unforgettable, but now the league belonged to Kareem. He was already the best player in the NBA, already an MVP, already a champion, and he was just getting started. 1971 wasn't just another season. It was the year Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Oscar Robertson turned Milwaukee into a basketball powerhouse. The year the Bucks announced themselves as the team of the future. And the year the NBA's balance of power shifted to the Midwest. If you were watching the NBA in 1972, you remember a season of pure dominance out west. The Los Angeles Lakers, after years of heartbreak and near misses, finally broke through in historic fashion. The regular season was nothing short of legendary. The Lakers, led by Jerry West, Wilt Chamberlain, and Gail Goodrich, went on a run that may never be touched. A 33-game winning streak, the longest in NBA history. Night after night, they crushed opponents, and by the end of the season, they had a 69-13 record, the best the league had ever seen at the time. Showtime wasn't here yet. That would come later with Magic. But this Lakers team played like a machine. West orchestrated, Goodrich was pouring in over 25 a night, and Wilt, even past his scoring prime, anchored the defense and the boards with sheer power. Meanwhile, the defending champion Milwaukee Bucks were still a force. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar put up monster numbers again, 34 points and 16 rebounds per game, and looked every bit like the league's best player. With Oscar Robertson still guiding the backcourt, Milwaukee finished with 63 wins of their own. In the East, the Knicks, Celtics, and Bullets all battled, but it felt like the eventual champion would have to come from the West. The playoffs gave us the matchup everyone wanted, the Bucks versus the Lakers in the Western Conference Finals. Kareem versus Wilt, the present versus the past. In a series loaded with future Hall of Famers, the Lakers' balance was too much. Wilt held his ground against the younger Kareem. Goodrich was brilliant, and Jerry West provided the steadying hand. Los Angeles took the series in 6 games, punching their ticket back to the finals. On the other side, the Knicks returned after grinding through the East, setting up a rematch of the 1970s finals. But this time, there would be no Will Reed miracle, no Madison Square Garden magic. The Lakers were too dominant, too hungry, and too determined to end the curse of so many failed finals runs. Wilt owned the paint, grabbing nearly 20 rebounds a night. Goodrich lit up the scoreboard, and in Game 5, with Wilt putting up 24 points and 29 rebounds, the Lakers closed the series and finally claimed the championship that had eluded them for over a decade. For Jerry West, it was redemption. After 8 finals losses, Mr. Clutch finally got his ring. For Wilt, it was validation, even in his 30s. He proved he could anchor a championship team. And for the Lakers, 1972 was immortality. A record-breaking season, a 33-game winning streak that still stands, and a long-awaited championship to cap it off. 1972 wasn't just another year. It was the year the Lakers finally buried the ghosts of their finals failures. The year Wilt and West got their long-awaited crown. And the year Los Angeles delivered one of the greatest seasons in NBA history. If you were watching the NBA in 1973, you remember a season of redemption in New York. The Knicks, 2 years removed from their first championship and fresh off a finals loss to the Lakers in '72, came back hungry. This was the last ride for one of the most iconic cores in basketball history, and they weren't about to waste it. The regular season didn't belong to New York, though. The Boston Celtics, behind MVP Dave Cowens, racked up 68 wins, the second best total in NBA history at the time. Cowens wasn't flashy like Kareem or Wilt, but he was relentless. A 6'9" center who outworked everyone, grabbed every rebound, and led Boston with heart and hustle. The Celtics looked like the team to beat. Meanwhile, in Milwaukee, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was still dominating. He averaged 30 and 16. Oscar Robertson was still steady in the backcourt, and the Bucks were once again near the top of the standings. Out west, the Lakers were aging, but Jerry West and Wilt Chamberlain still had enough left to keep LA competitive. But the story of the year was the Knicks. Clyde Frazier, Willis Reed, Dave DeBusschere, Bill Bradley, and the newest piece, Earl the Pearl Monroe, had finally figured out how to make their blend of stars work. Clyde and the Pearl shared the backcourt. Reed provided leadership, and the team's trademark unselfish style gave them balance. They didn't win as many games as Boston or Milwaukee, but they had the veteran poise to survive in the playoffs. And the playoffs are where 1973 turned legendary. The Knicks upset the 68-win Celtics in the Eastern Conference Finals, knocking off Cowens, John Havlicek, and JoJo White in 7 grueling games. It was one of the biggest upsets in NBA history, and it showed that experience sometimes matters more than regular season dominance. In the West, the Lakers swept Chicago and then beat down Golden State in 5 games, setting up another New York-Los Angeles showdown in the finals. But unlike 1972, this time the Knicks flipped the script. Willis Reed, who had been slowed by injuries for years, provided inspiration. Clyde Frazier controlled the tempo, and Earl Monroe, once a rival star with Baltimore, finally cemented himself as a champion. The Knicks won the series in 5 games, capturing their second title in 4 years. Reed earned Finals MVP, but it was truly a team effort. The perfect example of New York's brand of basketball. Ball movement, defense, toughness, and sacrifice. 1973 wasn't just another season. It was the year the Knicks proved their 1970 title wasn't a fluke. The year Earl Monroe became a champion. And the last time Madison Square Garden has ever celebrated an NBA championship. If you were watching the NBA in 1974, you remember the Celtics were back on top of the basketball world. The Knicks had just pulled off their redemption story in 1973, but Boston was ready to reclaim its place at the throne. The regular season saw the Milwaukee Bucks once again led by Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who was flat out unstoppable. He averaged 27 points and 14 rebounds, won his 3rd MVP in just 5 years, and kept Milwaukee among the league's elite. But as dominant as Kareem was, this was the season the Celtics' new era truly arrived. Dave Cowens, John Havlicek, and JoJo White formed the backbone of a team that played with pace, balance, and toughness. Cowens was undersized for a center, but his energy and heart gave Boston an edge every night. They won 56 games, enough to take control of the East. The playoffs brought drama. Out west, Kareem and the Bucks pushed past Chicago to reach the finals once again, proving they were still the most consistent force of the decade outside of the Lakers. In the East, the Celtics knocked out Buffalo in 6 games before grinding past the defending champion Knicks in a tough 5-game series. That set up a classic: Boston versus Milwaukee, Havlicek versus Kareem, 2 franchises with everything on the line. The finals were an instant classic. It stretched all the way to 7 games, and it gave us one of the most iconic moments of the decade. In Game 6, with Milwaukee's season on the line, Kareem drilled a skyhook in double overtime to force a decisive Game 7. It was the kind of shot that reminded everyone why he was already the most dominant big man in the game. But in Game 7, Boston's depth and discipline were too much. Cowens battled Kareem possession by possession. Havlicek controlled the pace, and JoJo White stepped up as a scorer. The Celtics ran away with it, winning 102-87, and reclaimed their spot as NBA champions. For Boston, it was their first title without Bill Russell, and proof that the dynasty wasn't just tied to one big man. It was an organizational standard. For Kareem, it was another finals heartbreak despite being the league's best player. 1974 wasn't just another season. It was the year the Celtics officially entered their second great era, the year Cowens and Havlicek carried the torch, and the year the NBA gave us one of its greatest finals series of all time. If you were watching the NBA in 1975, you remember one of the most shocking championship runs in league history. No one had the Golden State Warriors circled as the team of destiny. No one expected Rick Barry, a 30-year-old forward known as much for his underhand free throws as his scoring flair, to drag a roster full of young, unproven teammates all the way to the mountaintop. But that's exactly what happened. The regular season started with chaos. In the East, the Boston Celtics and Washington Bullets were the frontrunners. Boston was still powered by Dave Cowens and John Havlicek, while Washington boasted Alvin Hayes and Wes Unseld, one of the toughest front courts in basketball. The Bullets won 60 games, tops in the league, and most experts assume they were heading for their first NBA championship. Meanwhile, out west, the Warriors quietly put together a 48-win season. They weren't dominant like the Bucks had been in years past. They didn't have the star power of the Lakers. But they had Rick Barry. Coming back to the NBA after a few years in the ABA, Barry had matured into a leader, not just a scorer. He averaged nearly 30 points a game, led the league in free throw percentage with his iconic granny shot, and set the tone for a group of young players who didn't know they weren't supposed to win. Guys like Jamal Wilkes, then Keith Wilkes, Clifford Ray, and Phil Smith weren't household names yet, but they bought in, played hard, and complemented Barry perfectly. The playoffs, though, were where 1975 became unforgettable. In the East, the Bullets outlasted Boston in a brutal 6-game series. Alvin Hayes was a force. Unseld controlled the boards, and Washington punched their ticket to the finals with all the momentum in the world. Out west, the Warriors shocked the league. They knocked off the Seattle Supersonics, then stunned the Chicago Bulls in a grueling Western Conference Finals. All of a sudden, Golden State was in the finals, but almost no one gave them a chance. The Bullets had the size, the experience, and the star power. On paper, it looked like a mismatch. But the finals flipped that script fast. Rick Barry was brilliant, averaging nearly 30 points per game. Jamal Wilkes, a rookie, played with poise beyond his years. And Golden State's defense frustrated Washington's big men from the opening tip. The Warriors stole Game 1 on the road, then never looked back. In one of the most lopsided upsets in NBA history, Golden State didn't just beat the Bullets, they swept them. 4 straight. No hesitation, no fear. When the buzzer sounded in Game 4, the Warriors were champions, and the Bullets were left stunned. It was one of the great underdog stories in basketball history. Rick Barry, often criticized for being difficult or arrogant earlier in his career, had reinvented himself as a leader. His young teammates delivered on the biggest stage, and Golden State claimed its first championship since the franchise was in Philadelphia in 1956. 1975 wasn't just another season. It was the year the mighty Bullets collapsed, the year Rick Barry redeemed his career, and the year the Golden State Warriors shocked the basketball world with a title run nobody saw coming. If you were watching the NBA in 1976, you remember two things: the Boston Celtics climbing back to the top, and the league itself changing forever. The regular season was balanced, with no single team running away with the standings. The Celtics finished with 54 wins behind Dave Cowens, John Havlicek, and JoJo White, a core that combined toughness with consistency. Boston wasn't flashy, but they knew how to win. In the West, the Phoenix Suns shocked everyone by sneaking into the playoffs with just 42 wins, led by Paul Westphal and rookie sensation Alvin Adams. Nobody thought much of them at the time, but they would end up delivering one of the most iconic moments in finals history. Meanwhile, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was still the league's most dominant player. He won his fourth MVP in 7 years while averaging 27 points, 17 rebounds, 5 assists, and just over 4 blocks per game for the Lakers. He was on another level, but LA as a team wasn't ready to return to the finals just yet. The playoffs brought surprises. In the East, Boston handled the Buffalo Braves, then outlasted the Cleveland Cavaliers in 6 games to reach the finals. In the West, Phoenix stunned Golden State, the defending champions. The Warriors had Rick Barry, Jamal Wilkes, and the confidence of a title team. But the Suns pulled off the upset in 7 games, capped off by Westphal's clutch play and Adams' versatility. That set up an unlikely finals. Boston, the proven powerhouse, against Phoenix, the upstart underdog. And the series gave us one of the greatest games in NBA history. Game 5 at the Boston Garden went down as the triple overtime classic. Both teams traded blows for over 60 minutes of game time. Phoenix kept fighting back. Gar Heard hit a miracle shot at the buzzer of the second overtime to force a third. But JoJo White and Boston refused to lose. White finished with 33 points in 60 minutes played. Havlicek hit clutch shots, and the Celtics finally escaped, 128-126. Boston went on to win the series in 6 games, capturing their 13th championship, and JoJo White was named Finals MVP. But the 1976 season wasn't just about Boston's title. It was about transformation. That summer, the NBA and ABA officially merged. After nearly a decade of competing for players, fans, and attention, the two leagues became one. 4 ABA teams joined the NBA: the Denver Nuggets, Indiana Pacers, San Antonio Spurs, and New York Nets. Along with them came a wave of new talent from the ABA pipeline: Julius Erving, George Gervin, David Thompson, and eventually Moses Malone, stars who would redefine the league in the years to come. The merger didn't bring over the ABA's three-point line just yet, as the NBA wouldn't adopt it until 1979, but it injected the league with a new style: flashier, faster, more above the rim. The NBA was no longer just a bruising half-court game. It was becoming entertainment. 1976 wasn't just another season. It was the Celtics' last hurrah of the Havlicek era, the season of the Triple Overtime Classic, and the year the NBA finally absorbed the ABA, forever changing the league's identity. If you were watching the NBA in 1977, you remember a new champion, a new energy, and a new look for the league itself. This was the first season after the ABA-NBA merger, and basketball suddenly felt fresher, faster, and more exciting. 4 former ABA teams, the Nuggets, Pacers, Spurs, and Nets, joined the NBA, bringing with them stars and styles that pushed the game forward. Julius Erving, George Gervin, David Thompson. These weren't just players, they were entertainers. The NBA was no longer just a grinded-out league. The merger injected flair, athleticism, and personality. But the biggest story of 1977 didn't come from a flashy ex-ABA team. It came from Portland. The Trailblazers, a franchise that had never even made the playoffs before, suddenly rose to the top of the basketball world. The regular season still belonged to the heavyweights: Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was as dominant as ever, averaging 26 points, 13 rebounds, and 3.2 blocks to win his 5th MVP in 8 seasons. The Philadelphia 76ers, now armed with Julius Erving after the ABA merger, became must-watch television. Dr. J brought high-flying dunks to the NBA mainstream, and Philly stormed to 50 wins. Out east, the Boston Celtics and Washington Bullets kept their grip on the standings. While in the West, Kareem's Lakers won 53 games and looked poised for another finals run. Portland, meanwhile, finished with 49 wins. Bill Walton, finally healthy after years of foot injuries, was blossoming into the kind of all-around big man the league had never really seen. He rebounded, passed, defended, and controlled the tempo like no other center. Maurice Lucas brought toughness. Lionel Hollins provided guard play, and under head coach Jack Ramsey, the Blazers played an unselfish, free-flowing style that clicked at just the right time. The playoffs flipped the league upside down. Portland edged the Bulls in the first round, outlasted Denver in the semis, then shocked Kareem and the Lakers in the West Finals, sweeping them in 4 games. Walton outplayed the league's MVP, controlling the series on both ends of the floor. Suddenly, the Blazers, a team that had never been here before, were in the NBA Finals. Waiting for them was Philadelphia. The Sixers, led by Dr. J, were loaded with talent. George McGinnis, Doug Collins, World B. Free. They had scoring everywhere. And when the Sixers jumped out to a 2-0 series lead, it looked like the dream was over for Portland. But that's when the legend of the 77 Blazers was born. Walton dominated the paint. Maurice Lucas brought edge and fight, and Portland ripped off 4 straight wins. In Game 6, Walton put up 20 points, 23 rebounds, 7 assists, and 8 blocks. One of the greatest finals performances of all time. The Blazers clinched their first title, and Portland erupted in celebration. 1977 wasn't just another season. It was the year the ABA flair hit the NBA. The year Dr. J officially brought highlight basketball to the big stage. And the year Bill Walton and the Portland Trail Blazers pulled off one of the greatest Cinderella stories in league history. If you were watching the NBA in 1978, you remember a season that gave us one of the most unlikely champions in league history. The Washington Bullets, a team that limped into the playoffs with just 44 wins, somehow clawed their way through the postseason and ended up holding the trophy. The regular season didn't belong to Washington at all. Out west, the Portland Trail Blazers picked up right where they left off after their miracle run in '77. Bill Walton was at the peak of his powers, controlling games with defense, rebounding, and passing. Portland roared to a 50-10 start and looked unstoppable. But Walton's foot injuries resurfaced late in the season, derailing both him and the Blazers' hopes of repeating. In the East, it was the Philadelphia 76ers who seemed poised for greatness. Julius Erving was electrifying, averaging 20 points per game while filling arenas with his ABA flair. George McGinnis and Doug Collins added scoring punch, and Philly finished with 55 wins, the best record in the conference. Meanwhile, the Bullets slogged through an up-and-down year. Alvin Hayes put up numbers, Wes Unseld brought toughness, and Bob Dandridge was steady, but Washington finished just 44-38. They entered the playoffs as a 3 seed. Dangerous, sure, but hardly anyone's pick to win at all. And then, the postseason chaos began. In the West, the defending champion Blazers collapsed without a healthy Walton, falling to Seattle. The Supersonics, led by Dennis Johnson, Jack Sikma, and coach Lenny Wilkins, surged to the finals. In the East, Philly's star power couldn't hold up under pressure. Washington stunned them in 6 games, with Hayes and Dandridge hitting clutch shots while Unseld controlled the glass. Just like that, the Bullets, a team most had written off, were heading to the finals. The matchup was Washington versus Seattle, 2 franchises chasing their first championship. The finals turned into a war of attrition. Seattle took a 3-2 series lead behind Dennis Johnson's two-way brilliance, and it looked like Washington's run was finally done. But the Bullets dug in. In Game 6, they forced a deciding Game 7 with defense and grit. Then in Seattle, they delivered one of the biggest wins in franchise history. Hayes scored 15 of his 27 points in the third quarter to swing the game. Unseld controlled the boards, and the Bullets pulled away to win 105-99. When the final buzzer sounded, the Washington Bullets were champions. Wes Unseld, who only averaged 9 points per game but anchored the team with leadership and rebounding, was named Finals MVP. For Hayes, it was redemption after years of being criticized for shrinking in big moments. For Dandridge, it was validation as one of the league's most underrated stars. 1978 wasn't just another season. It was the year the Bullets shocked the world, the year Portland's dynasty dreams ended before they started, and the year the NBA reminded us that sometimes the best story comes from the most unlikely champion. If you were watching the NBA Finals in 1979, you remember the Seattle Supersonics finally finishing what they started. After coming so close in 1978, they ran it back, learned from their mistakes, and captured the first and only championship in franchise history. The regular season was wide open. In the East, the Washington Bullets were back as the defending champions, still led by Elvin Hayes, Wes Unseld, and Bob Dandridge. They weren't as sharp as the years before, but they managed 54 wins, best in the conference. The Philadelphia 76ers with Julius Erving were still electric but inconsistent. Out west, Seattle and Phoenix were battling for control, while the Denver Nuggets, fresh from the ABA merger, were making noise behind David Thompson and Dan Issel. The Supersonics, though, were the team to watch. Lenny Wilkens had built a balanced roster around defense, teamwork, and clutch shot-making. Dennis Johnson emerged as a star, combining lockdown perimeter defense with timely scoring. Gus Williams was lightning quick. Sikma was steady inside, and the role players Fred Brown, Paul Silas, Lonnie Shelton all bought into their roles. Seattle finished with 52 wins, good enough to earn another shot at redemption. The playoffs were a gauntlet. In the East, the Bullets survived a scare from the Atlanta Hawks and then outlasted the San Antonio Spurs in 7 games in the Eastern Conference Finals. A reminder of how strange the playoff alignment was in the 70s. Washington reached the finals for the second straight year, but they weren't the same team. Older, slower, and not nearly as intimidating. Out west, the Sonics took care of business. They beat the Lakers in 5 games in the semis, then outlasted Phoenix in a brutal 7-game Western Conference Finals, with Gus Williams averaging nearly 27 points for the series. The finals were a rematch, Bullets vs. Sonics, Part 2. But this time, there would be no upset. Seattle had grown up. They weren't rattled by the moment, they weren't outworked, and they weren't afraid. Dennis Johnson and Gus Williams were sensational. Jack Sikma held his own against Washington's front line, and the Sonics closed out the Bullets in 5 games. DJ was named Finals MVP, cementing his place as one of the best two-way guards of the decade. But the 1979 season was about more than just Seattle's coronation. It was also about transition. The old guard, West, Baylor, Wilt, was gone. Kareem was still dominant. Dr. J was still soaring. But the league was about to get 2 new stars that would change everything. In the 1979 NBA draft, the Los Angeles Lakers selected Magic Johnson with the first overall pick. And in the background, Larry Bird, who had already been drafted by the Boston Celtics in 1978 but stayed at Indiana State for 1 more year, was waiting to arrive. The decade ended with the Sonics lifting the trophy, but everyone could feel it. The NBA was about to explode. Magic and Bird were on the way. Television exposure was growing, and the stage was set for the league's most iconic rivalry. 1979 wasn't just another season. It was the year Seattle finally broke through, the year the Bullets' window closed, and the year the NBA unknowingly set the table for the Magic and Bird show that would define the 1980s. The 1970s were more than just a decade of basketball. They were a decade of balance and transformation. From Willis Reed limping out of the tunnel in '70 to Kareem's dominance in Milwaukee. From Rick Barry's underhand free throws to Bill Walton's all-around brilliance in Portland. This was the only era where dynasties didn't dominate. Parity did. 8 different champions in 10 years. The Knicks, the Bucks, the Celtics, the Warriors, the Blazers, the Bullets, the Sonics, the Lakers. It gave us the Skyhook, the Triple Overtime Classic, the birth of the ABA dunk culture, the 33-game win streak, the Cinderella Blazers, and the merger that changed everything. It was a decade where the game expanded, evolved, and set the stage for everything that came next. Where Julius Erving flew from the ABA to the NBA. Where defense, teamwork, and grit clashed with flair, flash, and showtime in the making. Superstars rose, champions rotated, and one man, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, stood above them all. Through all the finals, all the rivalries, all the unforgettable moments, the 1970s gave us uncertainty. Every season felt wide open. Every year, a new champion. This wasn't the decade of inevitability. It was the decade of possibility. And it left us waiting for the arrival of Magic and Bird to carry the league into its golden age. You made it this far. You're one of us. So drop your favorite moment of the 1970s in the comments. And if you love content that remembers what made this game great, smash that like button and subscribe to the channel for more videos just like this one. We'll see you in the next one.